if it's city money that's going into these things, are we doing that equitably?
I don't have a good answer for you. Sorry.
Because I think it's different than just covering a counselor who wants to attend a community function. You know,
I don't know. It's just one of those things that we've always done. So if the council wants to look at it and not rent a table, I mean, I don't typically go to the event. I went the year that the mayor was honored, but other than that, I think I've gone to 2 in 9 years. So we just get a table because they ask us if we want to sponsor a table, and we've always said yes.
We're sponsoring a table at Greater Portland, Inc. Is that right?
I think so.
I think so.
Yeah. I think we are.
Yeah.
We have sponsored
some of our businesses in town.
We've sponsored other things as well from other organizations. So if the council wants to.
Most of these are a cost about what, $1,200 or so for a table?
Do you know what the table costs for Heart of Gold?
Well, the other differentiator is, are there organizations that the city is a member of the organization, like GPI through the small cities, versus some that are located in Wilsonville and function, but that we don't specifically do a membership of. I don't know how that.
I mean, I really think this is
It's a policy question.
It's a policy question for council more than anything. It's like,
yeah.
What do you want to do? I mean, there's some language in the council protocol manual about if a counselor wants to attend an event and the city covers the cost, not for the spouse, but generally speaking, we haven't drilled down to the level of detail that you're talking about. If that's something you want to do, then obviously we could.
Would the council like to see sort of a report on these organizations and which ones we hold memberships in, or which one?
Just if somebody asked, why don't you buy a table at the Shriners, or do we buy a table at the Shriners? Big event. I don't know.
I'm not aware. The only table I'm aware of that we buy every year is this Heart of Gold, because it's quote unquote a community, an event celebrating community volunteerism. I'm not aware of any others.
Yeah. Well,
so if we would need some sort of a report, look into these different organizations and what
Shouldn't be hard to query our financial system to see how much money we're giving to nonprofits in the community. If this is something you want to do, I'm sure that we could get someone in finance to take a look and do a 3-year history to kind of look at it.
And I guess the other question is which ones are active in the community that we're not supporting? I mean, if we're looking at an equity question.
and I think there's a distinction between supporting a counselor, or especially the mayor, to attend most anything.
Well, that's the other way you could handle it, is you could just say that you're not going to sponsor any tables.
But we'll cover
Individual
any counselors who want to attend.
Yeah.
And make that the policy for, these 10 organizations or 15 organizations or however many, I don't know how many there are.
We should look at the economic development side of it, because I think that we have either jointly done some things or individually as a city done some things with some of the economic development. Okay, so.
I know we've sponsored some things through the chamber. We've, bought some ads with the chamber.
Westside Economic Alliance, CCBA,
Yeah.
GPI.
Yeah, we'll take a look.
Okay.
We can bring back a report. And then you can adopt a policy for council and we'll put it in the council protocol.
We can
Then
at least
we'll have a
figure out
policy.
what we think at that point.
So the table is $480. And it's
which is
$60 per person.
eight tickets.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the reason why, I would guess, is that in the past, we probably had a good turnout with council and staff that have attended those events, so renting a table just made more sense. That would be my guess.
Okay, any other concerns or questions? All right, why don't we then move along here, our pre-council work session items, short as our council meeting is going to be, but work session starting with our annual urban renewal report, please.
Hello.
My name is Keith Katko. I'm the Assistant Finance Director for the city. So tonight I'm just going to touch base on some tax increment financing requirements. This is satisfy a compliance requirement. And I just have 5 PowerPoint slides to share with you tonight and a brief recap of the annual Urban Renewal Report, which is found in your packet. The report is a requirement of ORS 457.460, requiring certain yearly financial disclosures, impacts, and purposes for which any money has been received in the past year. This report is due each year by January 31st and is based on the audited financial statements for fiscal year 2019. Also, in accordance with the ORS, a notice has been published that the report has been prepared and is on file with the city and in the agency, and the information contained in the statements is available to all interested parties. The notice was published in the Wilsonville Spokesman this past week, and it'll be published again next week. And the report will be put on our city's website by the end of this week. Okay. So just a couple of highlights from the report that we can go through. First up is debt load. Under state law for urban renewal, tax increment collections may only be spent to pay principal and interest on indebtedness, which of course is limited by plan maximum indebtedness. So this chart displays out the 3 plans with their maximum indebtedness, the debt issued to date, and the remaining available debt. So perhaps most interesting is the remaining available debt on each of the 3 plans. The year 2000 plan right there has $22.8 million remaining. One caveat, these are fiscal year end 2019 numbers. We did take out a $9 million additional loan, so the year 2000 available debt has been dropped down to $13 million. The $9 million that we took out this year is going to be used to pay for the 5th Street to Kinsman project, as well as a bit of the Beckman Bridge. So right now we're about $13 million left on that year 2000 plan. West Side plan has $6.4 million. And we are just getting started with Coffee Creek, so we still have $63.2 million of that. Second thing of perhaps interest would be outstanding bonded debt. Across all plans was $32.5 million. Outstanding debt has trended downwards over the past couple of years as the city has actually shifted away from bonding to strategically using overnight inter-fund lending from the general fund to release the tax increment collections from the urban renewal funded capital, for the urban renewal funded capital projects. For example, that $9 million debt we incurred this year, we actually just took the general fund, did an overnight loan of $9 million to the urban renewal. It frees up the tax increment money in the urban renewal fund, and then it gets paid back the next day to the general fund, and that saves a considerable amount of money for our, because going out for bonded debt is got some expense associated with it. So
because of that, the outstanding debt line does not equate to funds available for use in each of those, right?
Right, they're different. That $9 million reduced the maximum, the maximum indebtedness is $107 million. Even the overnight loan counts against that debt issued to date. So that $9 million drops that available balance down to $13 million. So it's just debt. It's debt, whether it's overnight or indebted or bonded debt.
Okay, so you're going to have a funds available line later on?
Yeah. Or it's in the report. So slide number 3. The financial impact. And this is based on the incremental value, and amounts are in million. I think this slide really details out the magnitude of the growth in the assessed value. If you look at the 3 plans, total assessed value, $499 million. That second line there is the frozen tax base, which was established when the plan was established. Started at a frozen base of $45 million, close to $500 million now for the year 2000 plans. Coffee Creek, of course, is just getting started, but it's already has an incremental bump up of $27 million. Particularly, another interesting thing, particularly from the accounting perspective, are the taxes available on the incremental value. and really the taxes levied. So those are the taxes available of 6.1. The taxes levied for each one of those districts vary. The 4 million is the result of, back in 2000, the city council limited the incremental property tax received for the year 2000 plan. So it's been capped at 4 million. What that does is make that 2 million, that 2.1 million available for the overlapping taxing jurisdictions. The West Side Plan has a similar cap that is the result of some legislative initiatives from a while ago, which has capped that at 5 million. So the taxes levied amount is about 9.2 million, but so it's kind of like there's a little bit of give and take. There's some taxes levied, but these districts have increased so much in assessed value that there is a portion being returned back to the overlapping districts. So basically that bottom line. Next slide is kind of more of a visual presentation of the growth of the assessed value. Can't really see that, but again, the frozen assessed value is that number at the very bottom for each one of the three districts: 45 million, 18 million, and 99 million. And then the incremental assessed value is in the green bar. So you could see how the original assessed frozen caps have grown immensely since each district has been established. And this, yeah.
The 27 million for Coffee Creek,
Right.
is that correct? Is that number correct from the previous slide? Because I thought it was higher than that.
7 million.
It's 126?
So for this one, the frozen tax base was 99 million, and it's grown up. It's grown an incremental value of 127. So the total assessed value is 126. So these two numbers equal the total assessed value.
Okay.
It's really only, I mean, this is the frozen base right here. It's so young. I think this district is from 2016. It's just starting.
So have we got any construction in that district that has added to increment? Is this totally the growth of the old
3%.
Original 3% a year for 3 years?
I don't offhand believe we've started any construction. I don't know offhand for sure.
No,
It's hard to see how about 3%, 3%, 3% gets us 27 million.
Maybe some
Right.
construction yards or something, but nothing of any significance.
Chris
Yeah.
says no, okay.
So this is kind of a return on investment slide. These blue lines are the debt that's been incurred, 84.4 million. So if we go back to this, or this one, it represents the debt issued. So 84, 43, 3.8, and then the total assessment that has resulted from the infrastructure that has been put in place as the result of the debt to finance the infrastructure.
So I always like to see that in a percentage because I get to brag about that when I go to meetings. So
Yeah.
from 84 million to 454 is what, about
I'll have to shoot something back to you. I don't know. It's a lot.
I think one of them,
five times, you know, so
West
five.
Side's like 1,400%.
Right,
return
when
on
we're way up
investment.
here to
So
658
people
million.
think about their investments that way,
Right.
about what kind of return on the investment that they've made. And it just puts it in a context that I think resonates with people when we are able to point out that really amazing growth in those areas. Of course, we're hoping that Coffee Creek gets to building that kind of equity too.
Yeah, we just took out that 3.8 million last year, and as kind of trying to get that going. So that's kind of the totality of the visual presentation. Again, it's a lot more detail is in the annual financial report, which is in your packet, and it'll be put on the city's website. And there's some additional information that has been published in the Wilsonville Spokesman. So and that is it.
So the rest of the question, I think, when we're thinking about this is what projects remain undone in each of those districts that we are contemplating?
Right.
And what funds do we have available to go toward those proposed projects? And, are they adequate or are they inadequate? Are they available?
Yeah, those are good questions. The year 2000 plan, it's after that 9 million debt this year, we're down to 13 million. My understanding is the Kinsman road project should be, will that be completed this year? I don't know. I'm looking at somebody to help me out. But no, okay. The other big part of that funds, though, would be to pay for the Beckman Bridge, which most likely, from my understanding, will not be enough to cover that Beckman Bridge. The West Side plan has, Brown Road is there's like one or two projects left on. They're almost done. I mean, these two plans, the year 2000 plan, the end is in sight of the projects remaining, and really the West Side plan as well. And Coffee Creek's just getting started.
You'll be getting significant briefings on 5th to Kinsman and Beckman Dip Bridge in the near future.
Yeah.
Some challenges with both of them.
So that is that, and that this report is really for compliance, to get us in compliance with the ORS requirements. So that it will be that.
Councilor Lehan.
I just have one question. Who's responsible for this picture?
It's incredible.
What's the picture?
It's like
The
a,
stork
heron.
flying.
Oh, that's
by,
awesome.
Or the blue
Very
heron.
blue heron,
yeah.
clearly identified. Why did we not credit somebody's name?
I don't know who took it. I got it out of the directory of stock photos that we have. It's always a challenge to find something interesting.
It's in Wilsonville.
It is. It looks like some
City
kind of
Hall?
office building. I'm not sure. Maybe over
Is
by.
it City Hall or is it?
I don't think it's
No.
City Hall.
No, but.
It looks like,
Where?
Might be Mentor.
looks like Mentor or OIT.
Yeah.
Somebody at Mentor shot it, you think? Don't know.
Right.
We
It's a
should
mystery.
credit them, whoever they
Are
are.
we sure it's in Wilsonville?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
sure. It was on
Okay,
there.
all right, hey, easy.
I do have a question.
Yes, Councilor Ackerville.
I appreciate this. It's always great to have this review, and I appreciate, just sitting down and looking through the report. I did notice in the report there was a mention of the TIF zones and how, those
Right.
discontinued, I think November 19, right, just a few months ago. And I understand if it's just too early to say, but it started me thinking, because we've kind of had some discussions, if there would be a replacement that would take a different form for some sort of TIF program. And I wondered, how will that impact things for you for reporting?
Well, yeah, we took them off. They do count against
Acreage.
the area, acreage area cap test for urban renewal. But my understanding is they're really small. They're property by
Right,
property.
yeah.
And so the ones that have existed and have been in existence for a number of years finally dropped off. They don't count anymore. But my understanding, Jordan Vance, the urban renewal manager, is going to be bringing back some kind of TIF program. I just don't know enough about it.
It wouldn't, you may recall that the discussion was to not necessarily have specific properties
Exactly.
identified, but a
Right.
program that would trigger if somebody's going to invest X number of dollars and create X number of jobs.
Then it kind of gets brought in,
Then we would
right?
be ready to say, okay, the program is approved, so all we need to do now is do the legal description and go through the process.
Exactly, that's what I was remembering, but my understanding then is if something comes up at a location and meets whatever criteria has been established in the program, then it gets brought in, then suddenly you need a report on this
Yeah, we
new
will.
property, right? And I
Yeah, we
just
would.
wondered how that would work logistically too.
Well,
you
we
know?
would coordinate with finance and make sure that we're doing all the reporting requirements that we do now for our two current urban renewal agencies. Yeah.
Yeah, because we'd have things more popping up and popping down and popping up and popping down with that sort of design, I guess.
Yeah,
You know?
it's possible.
Yeah, just to
That program hasn't been fully fleshed out yet, so all those
Right.
details would be identified and worked into the program.
And this is just an annual, like, we just have to catch them
This is a state
For the,
requirement.
yeah, but for the annual report, right?
For active
Yeah.
urban renewal.
So we're not required to report on our individual tax lot?
We haven't drawn any, we haven't used them in any way, shape, or form that would require us to do any reporting to the state.
Doesn't even require that we make note of that? Yeah.
No.
No, and from my understanding, this
You have
program
to,
is.
you have to incur debt for
Right.
this to be a
And
program.
the TIF zones just expired until,
That was the enabling ordinance, said that if they weren't used by X number of years.
I think it
that
was
they
in
would expire.
November.
Yeah.
They're done. So it's
But that was after this fiscal year.
November,
No.
right?
So this is through June
Well,
19, right?
right. In any case, they weren't
utilized.
They weren't being used.
So it's,
You're only reporting on the agencies that you're actually utilizing tax increment financing, not on something that was speculative or hypothetical, because all those were, even though they were actual urban renewal areas that could have,
Yeah.
they could have incurred debt. Nobody ever availed themselves of those.
and you're
properties.
right, they did expire in November of 2019. They are mentioned in the annual report, but not elaborated on because there's nothing there.
There's no debt.
Yeah,
Okay.
Okay, as long as that's what was needed.
yeah.
All right, thanks very much.
It's on page 5 of your
Right.
report if you want to,
One small
if you
paragraph.
want to read that one paragraph about TIF zones.
Then, building permit fee increase. Oh, good, yeah.
Everybody's favorite topic.
Quite a bit of data in this report I saw, though.
Okay. Make sure I have this queued up correctly here. All right. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Dan Carlson. For the record, I serve as the city's building official. Okay, I have to speak into this thing, I guess, huh? Okay. I don't do this very often, so a little coaching is helpful. Tonight, I'm here to present to you a proposal for a fee adjustment. Really, and what I'm looking for is to gain your perspective, your feedback to sort of help shape this proposal and understand whether or not we should be moving forward with it in the end. So that's my end game. Tonight, we're going to cover the topics that you see on your screen, permit activity, how fees are calculated, the elements of a fee proposal, the revenue gap that we're looking at, how do we compare to other jurisdictions, and proposed timeline. So with that, I'll kind of march through this. And that's not where that's supposed to end. Let's start there at the beginning. How
Starting
about
at the
that,
end.
huh? Okay. I love this program, but it is a little quirky and I'm still kind of learning it. So just to kind of start with for some background, our general purpose in the building division is to provide service, and services that we provide are to issue construction permits, provide pre-project guidance for pre-development meetings. We conduct plan reviews, perform building safety and other types of inspections. We promote a safe built environment through outreach. We really love that part of what we do. And we do this by administering the codes that you see there on the right-hand side of your screen. Our funding source is building permit fees and charges for services, services like plan review fees. Revenues are received essentially at 2 points in time. The first one is the point of time at the time of permit application. The second one is the time of permit issuance. And revenues have to be healthy enough to really to cover a downturn and to bridge a long enough span of time to provide services for a full duration of a project. So for example, we issued the Hilton Hotel in February, and the revenues that we received at the time of that issuance have to last through the duration of that project. We probably won't issue a C of O for that until July-ish, is what it's looking like. So just to give you a little context there. The last time that we raised building permit fees were in 2006. So we have been functioning under the same fee schedule, same fee rates for 14 years. The cost to provide service, as you well know, has risen steadily since 2006. The permit activity, just to give you some perspective as far as, you know, Brian just asked me the other day, how are we doing on permitting? So this is a 12-year look, and it's basically showing, you know, what we've experienced since the Great Recession and hit us hard in 2009, started to climb out of it in 2010, peaked in 2015, really hitting record levels from 2014 through early 2018. And by the end of 2018, we just started to see that drop. And it really seems right now to me, and this is my gut check and having done this for quite a few years, that it seems to like it's leveling off. Like we've sort of found our, I don't know if you want to call it a happy medium, but we've sort of found this level of development activity that seems to be pretty stable. These different colors of lines there, you can see the red being commercial TI remodels and additions, purple being new single-family permits. The highlight there is in 2015, you know, we hit this record number of 381 permits, and just shortly after that, I came to the city, and then we started to see this downward trend and sort of have leveled off again at 128 and 134. I will say, though, that those numbers 128 and 134 are by no means, in my opinion, a slowdown. In the previous jurisdiction I came from, those 2 years, or the years prior where we were having our record, supposed to be record numbers, we had 34 new home permits and 56 new home permits. So we're well beyond that, and that population was double from where we are, just to give you some context. So we have seen a real noticeable wind down in Villebois, and we are getting to the end of that development. We're also starting to see sort of some influx in Frog Pond. It is not the same robust sort of development activity that we saw in Villebois, though. So we're taking that into account. We are being told by the developers in forecasting our revenues for the years going forward that we should anticipate between 10 and 12 per month for the totality of those three developers. So any questions on this slide before I move forward? Okay. So how are fees calculated? So thankfully we have an OAR, Oregon Administrative Rule, that spells out the consistent fee methodology that we're required to use by state law. And so this methodology gives some context that the fees are either valuation based, or they are based on the number of fixtures or equipment, things of that nature. So if we look at a valuation-based fee schedule, it really is, the state law requires that we use a national table for valuation. That's published by the International Code Council, ICC. And we also have to evaluate the contractor's bid. And the law tells us that we have to use the higher of the two. The ICC table basically lays out how much the cost is per square foot for different types of construction. So it's pretty straightforward, it's pretty easy to use, but it ends up giving you a value. And you just compare the two. Once you get your valuation, then you run it through your fee schedule, and that ultimately gets you what your fee is. So I want to point out, though, that having a consistent fee methodology, that sounds great, and it is great. It doesn't necessarily mean that each jurisdiction is going to have consistent fees, that we're all going to charge the same thing, because we all have different fee schedules. And that's how that is intended to be set up. So in terms of the elements of a fee proposal, these are items that I've just personally and professionally come to promote and advance, and I want to check this with you to make sure that I'm on the same page as you are. So I like to keep the basic permit fees affordable. Some jurisdictions will charge you $50, $75 just to walk in the door. You know, we heard just the other day from a contractor that for a basic permit fee. In another jurisdiction, it was over $100 just for a basic fee. So my belief is that by having a high basic fee, that you really promote an environment where you're discouraging people from getting minimum permits that would otherwise cause those installations to be inspected and be safe. So I like to keep those basic fees low. I like to, well, we want to recover costs. We don't necessarily want to nickel and dime people or give them that sense that they're being overly charged, or we're looking at every available opportunity to charge them. We want to simplify our fees where we can, and we also want to keep our revenue local. I want to highlight that middle bullet, keep revenue local, because that's a really important one, and we're going to talk about that in just a bit. The the building permit fees and the plan review fees are really two different animals. The state surcharge is assessed based on the building permit fee. It doesn't have anything to do with the plan review fee. So if we raise the building permit fee, we're essentially sending more money to the state, okay? If we raise the plan review fee, we keep that revenue local, okay? So the strategy here is to find that happy balance where we're not sending revenue unduly to the state. We have to do that anyway, but rather keep it here locally and use it here locally to support our local program. So what you're going to see here are some numbers that speak to an 8.5% building permit fee increase, but raising the plan review fees so that they're equal to the building permit fee. And in that context, it really gets at about a 30% fee increase. So it's just a different way of looking at it and talking about it. But just wanted to be clear on that as you see these tables, and you probably saw the one in your packet that I included. So that is the bullet, keeping the revenue local. We have also gone through a number of different fee scenarios, and the one we've really sort of settled on is to do a one-time catch-up adjustment and then to implement smaller annual adjustments so that we're not, I don't like to do this. We don't want to come back and ask for large fee adjustments. It's not just a personal thing, but it's for the sake of the contractors and developers who are trying to plan their budgets. It's a lot easier for them to budget for a certain, fee rate increase every year as opposed to these, one-time major adjustments. And then also a big one for me is providing ample outreach to contractors. You have to give them enough time so they can adjust bids and build that into their costing. So those are just some elements, some core beliefs that I've come to, and I hope that aligns with your thinking as well. Certainly can talk about that in a bit. Moving on to this next slide, it just kind of highlights our revenues. You saw the graph with our workload. Now you're seeing one with our revenues, and they really sort of are similar. You see in 2015, and the graph shows 12 years of revenues, but after the Great Recession, we really spiked in around July of 2016. And the roller coaster ride that we've been on is we've dropped to 833,000 for end of year 18-19. So based on known projects and other trends, we've budgeted 802,000 for the current year. We're halfway through that year, so we're forecasting finishing that at 790,000, particularly as Villebois continues to taper down, and looking really next year at Villebois being built out from a single-family perspective. Even though we may have one more, they call it the Chang property, we may have one more development that could come through, and that does factor that in. So
anything in Coffee Creek in those projections for the next couple of years?
We do have moving out into proposed and beyond that, yes. We've come up with some scenarios where they're just basic, like warehouse-type scenarios to build those in, yes.
So I'm sorry, I've got to ask. Our concept in Coffee Creek is not to build warehouse. It's to build employment centers with higher value added than just empty warehouse space. So are we together on our projections between our planning and our
I think
buildings?
So. Yeah, I think so, because really what we're looking at, since the fees are valuation based, we just put a value in, and in the end, it's you never know when these projects are going to hit you. They could hit you one fiscal year, and then you don't see the fees actually for another fiscal year.
Yeah.
So we do have an exercise that we go through, and we consider current projects, any known projects that might be coming through the pipeline and planning, and then we do include some projects that would be future casting. So the next slide I want to show you is just really more of a graphic than anything. I call it the CATCO calculator. Keith has helped me tremendously build this thing so that we can do some, just some basic, where are we at? What do we need to do? What does this really look like? I want to point out the red arrow here, this first one, and I apologize for this being so small, but 833,000, you saw that number in the previous slide. That is where we ended that fiscal year. That leaves us with a cash gap of about $404,000 for this year. So if we continue this trend and not increase fees, that will grow significantly. What we're proposing to do is come in this third arrow, and we've estimated that in July 1st of 2020, an approximate 30% fee increase. We add that in the end of this fiscal year, and really what we need to get to is about between 230 and 250,000 added in cash flow per year to make this end of the third year come to the positive again. And we're really trying to get close to break even there. So that's just to show you that we're working through a bunch of scenarios, and that's kind of what we settled in. So when I do mention 30%, that is another way to also talk about the 8.5%. Yeah.
Councilor Linville.
I wonder if you, let's see, was that the slide we were just looking at? No. Can we look at that again? Yeah. Okay, so if I'm reading this correctly, in those years between 2009, June 30, 2009, through, well, and I guess I'm probably not understanding it correctly. I'm wondering where the additional revenue went during those years when there was considerable amount of revenue coming in from fees, and if that was transferred to the general fund or if it was utilized within buildings, and if so, what were the costs?
Sure.
You know, what were the costs? Because obviously you would have annually increased your budget to approximate the fees that were coming in, and the question is, did you spend all that money, or was it any of it transferred into the
So
general?
we do maintain a fund balance, and as I talked about earlier, you have to have enough fund balance to be able to not only span to cover services for these projects that are going on, but to also span fiscal years where you may have a downturn in the economy. Okay, so There is a downturn in this chart. Now, I didn't arrive here until 2016, so I can speak just a little bit to the numbers before 2016 in what I know. We have budgeted over time for the procurement of a fairly expensive permitting system. That is moving forward. We also have added staff to our budget, and so those are two things I can think of off the top of my head without going back and diving into the detail. But I can certainly do that for you if.
So could you go back one slide more to the, yeah. So without knowing what the department budget was, and I'm assuming that across, I mean, if you go from 2010-11, where it's about 865, straight over to where we are right now, and you take the upper lid off, which is almost twice what the budget is. Sure. Were those expended funds?
So we did not have the same level of staffing in 10-11 that we do now.
Okay.
We have about another 3 FTE that's
Okay.
been added to the building.
And
fund.
so reasonable to assume that during a time when you would have increased need for permits and for activity,
Yeah.
that you would bring additional staff on?
Yes, and one of the ways that I've balanced that in the 2016 era is bringing in contract services. We also had 2 retirees that we brought back, Bill Spring and Martin Brown, and we worked them both till Bill finally said, I'm retiring yet again.
Yeah.
So those funds, we've built up a fund balance that is appropriate, and it's where you want to be for this type of a fund, where you have to provide services that are so hard to predict and can come in at any point in time. But what you really get at is at the point in time your revenues start repeatedly going down and down, and those gaps get bigger and bigger, you have to, and this was acknowledged in the Budget Commission last year, you have to look at it and you have to make an adjustment so that you can maintain a fund balance for when we do go into a recession, because eventually we're going to do that again, and yet be able to provide the service that's needed for those projects. Does that help?
Yeah, I think my assumption is what you just said to me was that during that period of time, there were 3 FTE that were brought on and haven't essentially remained.
No, those 3 FTE have remained.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they have remained.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So I would like to follow up on that question for a sec. If you go to the next slide again, where you've got on the right-hand half of the expense column, you've got 2 columns labeled transfer out to general fund, transfer out to community development fund.
Yeah, so transfer outs are typically, basically the way to think about it is like our rent, our cost to, for IT, for legal, keeping the lights on. And so they fall into different categories. So it could be general fund, and we can provide, again, more detail on that. I really was just trying to give you some context to show you the bottom line and how we.
Yeah, I understand. But what I'm not really clear on is those columns, is that cash money from building permits that went back into other uses in the city budget then?
Well, it's basically, they operate as an enterprise fund.
Right.
But within that world, they also have to pay, like he said, they have to pay rent, they have to pay utilities, they have to pay things that any other operating fund would have to pay back to the general fund. They have to pay for administrative support.
Right, so those are essentially operating expenses for this subunit.
For this fund.
Correct.
Yes.
Right, and if you look at the numbers up there, they were bigger in the 16, 17, 18, and even 19 by considerable amounts than they were back in 11, 12, right?
I think it's there's more employees now. I mean, Kathy could come up and probably, I don't want to put you on the spot, or Keith, do you want to come and talk about how we do?
Well, yeah. I'd have to go back and really look through those years to see what was going on in terms of why those amounts varied from year to year. But in essence, yeah, it's paying for the accounting services, the HR services, the legal services. And at that time, in any one of those particular years, I would really just have to go back and look. I can't say offhand why 1 year was higher.
It's not surplus cash, though.
No.
It's not just
It's a
surplus
charge.
cash saying, here, let's give
No,
this to
no,
the
no.
general fund.
No.
This is the cost of running operations at the scale needed in that particular year.
Correct. And
Okay.
1 year could have been higher in terms of perhaps the general fund covered some kind of capital expenditure that was just then the general fund just turned around and charged that building fund because it was really building fund related. So that's why there might be
You'd
some
have to look at
difference.
each year individually.
Yeah. And then
Okay, so, just trying to be up here at this level.
Right.
Not down there in the weeds too
Yeah.
far. We had a smaller crew working back in
2010.
10, 11,
Right.
12, right? And then things spiked and we enlarged the crew, right? And now the operation has gone back to the 800,000-ish level, which
Right.
was what it had been back then.
Right.
And yet we're supporting that larger crew still, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So I can speak to
And so what is our long-term, idea about how that works? And there's corollary questions. Dan and I have had some conversations about the increased complexity of the building code structure that the state is moving to and how it's taking our employees more time to work through this new ASHRAE code instead of the ICC code that they're used to.
So just to give you a little bit of more perspective, when I arrived and was hired, I was assigned to manage the front counter staff for downstairs. And so one of those staff members was placed in a different fund. It was, and spread throughout. So we said, okay, that really, there's permit tech related duties. They really need to be, they're doing permit tech work. The building fund needs to support that. We had another, because we had so much work and still continue to have a tremendous amount of work, we had a half-time FTE that was an admin assistant, and we turned that into a permit technician and made it full-time. So that's another example. We had need to hire I basically reorganized the division, and because quite honestly, there was no way the existing staff could keep up with the work. We were on the verge of burnout. So I was granted, I put a reorganization proposal together, and it was approved and went forward, and reclassed some individuals to keep them, quite honestly, because the market for inspectors continues to be extremely volatile. It's like we're cannibalizing each other, trying to steal each other's good staff. So we've been able to keep our staff because of that reorganization. And so there's a lot of dynamics that go into this. So it is what it is. There's some more specifics, I'm happy to dive into that. But Tim makes a really good point on the complexity of our codes. You all got to experience firsthand going through Chapter 9 and updating that and how complex that was.
And that's only one little piece.
That's one little piece.
Councilor Leahan,
Well, I want to,
are you on your mic?
well, my mic is on. I wanted to add another perspective, and that is for if you are that Wilsonville has a reputation, or at least I know has had a reputation for being, for having very responsive building officials. And for any of us who have been in the middle of a big project, as you have, and I've been in the middle of medium-sized projects, but for our big builders, Villebois or whatever, it's absolutely critical that you have an inspector who can get out when you're ready to inspect. If your plumbing needs to be inspected and you've got a crew standing by ready to sheetrock it, and they can't cover it until it gets inspected by the plumbing inspector, they're on the clock. The builder is on the clock. You've got subs waiting for other subs, and one step has to be the inspection, and Wilsonville has a reputation for being very responsive and timely in getting to the construction site when it's needed, because they can't really schedule it, because you don't know when the plumber's going to be done, so that you could, you got to wait for the sub to be ready for the inspection. And meanwhile, you've got the sheetrockers standing by. So all of those things are important to our builders and developers to have that responsive building department. Now, another question I was going to, and is why we have to bring on people to fill out when we have a uptick in the building activity. I was going to ask about, I know electrical is done by the county. Is that the only one we don't do, or do we have other inspections that happen that are outside of our jurisdiction? And with regards to electrical, are we coordinated with them on fee increases, or do we care, or?
Yeah, the county kind of does their own thing, because they're covering not just obviously us, but everywhere in Clackamas County. And so we do let them know that, hey, we're doing a fee increase, but there's really not a nexus there other than that.
Electrical's the only other inspection, regular inspection thing
clarification I would add to that is the state does elevator inspections.
Oh, elevators, yeah.
And boiler pressure vessel inspections.
Okay.
So other than that, we handle everything else. We would not be able to petition the state to take on an electrical program until we hit a population of 30,000 by state law.
Okay.
So.
And do we get reasonable service from?
We get excellent service from the county.
Electricity.
Yes. Yeah.
Electricity.
That's
Electrical.
the feedback I get.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's good to know.
Okay. All right. I'm looking at the clock here, so apologize I've taken longer than.
I think we're all right.
But you had this in your packet, so I don't know. I won't spend a tremendous amount of time on this, but I do want to sort of point out that these are our 8 comparators. It gives you an overview of the different types of projects, comparing apples to apples. So the left column, you've got your single-family dwelling at 260,000, 2,000 square foot house, 500 square foot garage, and it just looks at the different fees that are assessed for each of those. Same thing with single-family addition, multifamily, new commercial, and then a commercial alteration. So I've given you a couple of columns as to highlight what the average is of each of all the 8, what the high is, and then what the low is. So if we go with I'm going to bring this over here just a little bit. If we go with the 8.5% building permit fee increase and make the plan review fee equal, we run this a fairly close $3,651 for the fee under that scenario versus $3,652 for for a straight-out 30% fee increase. Just so you can see how close that is. So it's adding to the cost of that $260,000 house about $842. And so you can kind of go through here and see the rest of these and how that works. Adding for a single-family addition, $50,000 in value, you're adding about $242 to the cost of that. New multifamily, $868,000 value, you're adding about $3,100. New commercial office, you're adding, that's about a $3.6 million office. You're adding about $10,500 to that cost. And then a commercial alteration, $75,000 value, you're adding $414. Any questions on that? Sure.
Councilor Linville.
Why would you look at the 8.5% versus the 30%? I mean, where is that number coming from?
Yeah, so good question. The reason for doing that is to, you can take the building permit fee and keep it, and not raise it much, but only raise it to the point where if we raise the plan review fee to be equal to the building permit fee, that comes in about 35%. So maybe a little more explanation for you would be helpful. The plan review fee currently is 65% of the building permit fee. So we bring that up to be equal, then it sort of lines itself out. Does that help? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Councilor Akeball.
Kind of a follow-up on
Sure.
that
Yeah.
train. And they always come coupled, then the plan review and, right?
Not always.
Okay.
There are some projects.
Because it seems like we're weighting one much more in this change, right?
Yeah, in most cases for new house permits, remodels, additions, new commercial remodels, additions, those are all generally going to require both a plan review and a building permit and a plan review fee. Mm-hmm. There are minor nature types of work that do not require a plan review. You could issue a permit over the counter.
Which of those two does the state keep?
The state keeps the building permit, the 12% of the building permit fee.
Right.
Yeah. So
We keep the plan review.
Okay.
we keep the plan review, correct.
Okay.
So I would like to be sure I understand correctly, and maybe some other
Yes.
people would also. At the end of all of our comparable cities there, you have an average column, which I assume is the average of the total fees for all those other cities.
Correct.
Is that correct? And then you
Yes, exactly.
transfer that number over to the right where it says Wilsonville there,
Yeah,
same number.
correct.
The 3693, under the average column, not the Wilsonville column, right? So then you're saying if we take our existing 2809 and do a 30% increase, we're at 3652,
Yes.
which would then compare to the average before we made a change for all the cities at 3693.
Correct.
Okay.
So we are still below average.
For the whole
Well-
set of comparable cities in our,
Slightly.
But like
Slightly.
$40.
yeah, ballpark.
We're right at about average. That's
Okay.
Just say it's the average.
Right, right. No.
When we go down through the next one, the alteration, same holds generally true, we're pretty close.
correct.
The next one is commercial apartments, is that what that is?
Yes.
1349, we go to 13.8, a little bit of difference. This one is what?
Commercial.
Commercial office.
Commercial
at
Commercial
3.6
office, okay.
million.
And we're at 42.8, and we go to 45.8, 3,000 difference on a, how many $1 million project?
You got it.
And this is a commercial
This is a commercial
alteration?
addition.
Okay. All right, so in looking at our competitive position in the region, that really seems to me to be a relevant statistic, looking at the fact that developers tend to work across jurisdictions in a variety of different municipalities, and we need to at least be in touch with that, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Councilor Ackerville.
I'm kind of looking at the comparison, and I know there is some vulnerability maybe in comparing specifically to other cities, right? Because we don't necessarily know their situation or when they lasted a review, right? Or, you know what I mean, in changing their own fees,
Well,
the schedule?
the biggest factor would be what their cost drivers are.
Correct. I can
They're
tell
setting
you,
their
Right.
fees to cover
Based
their
on
costs,
what-
right? We don't know
Okay.
what their costs are, so they could have way higher overhead than we do,
Yeah.
Right.
or lower. We
So,
don't know.
I mean, all of that's kind of like the precursor to, but I did go and look and, you know, to see how did we compare to different cities. And Tualatin is almost in every case, they have the minimum in the
Yeah.
data set. And then Lake Oswego is like right there in like number 2. Do we have any context of those two things to understand that better, or?
Tualatin does not have a large building department, I can tell you that,
It's
and Lake
very
Oswego is mostly built out.
Right, they're not going to have as much activity, so
Right.
probably a smaller.
So it's hard, these comparisons are always tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
Tualatin's
you're
almost
smart to
built
cue
out
it.
on residential land at this point, other than.
Well, except for
recent
Basalt
expansion.
Creek.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's down the road, though.
Okay.
And so I would bet,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a betting man by nature, but I would assume that once their residential activity starts to tick up, they will increase their fees.
And
just
then
out
that
of
would
necessity.
change this whole comparison group
Right.
that we're looking at, and your average is going to go up
Yeah.
too, right?
well, to that point, West Lynn just did a 35% fee increase
Okay.
just this year. So a lot of these, particularly with some of the PERS dynamics and trying to, because around 80% of our expenses are staff, you know, we have to account for that. So, you know, all of these jurisdictions, we're all wrestling with the same issue, and how do we cover those costs? So,
Councilor Linville.
Well, I think it's prudent for us to ask the question about staffing and, you know, why we would continue to need to have the amount of staff that we would bring on during those really high peak times. But I think we have to have the faith in our, you know, in our department heads and in our city manager that those things have been evaluated, and that if it really warranted a reduction in staff, that would have been a first, look at where we would have gone in a responsible. So I'm assuming that has been done, and otherwise you wouldn't bring this to the
It
council
has.
at this point without having done that due diligence.
And I would say, it really is driven by customer service expectations and standards, and that's the norm here. And I will tell you, since I've been here, we get people singing our praises all the time about how responsive we are, about how customer-friendly we are, and if you're gonna have that as an expectation, you're gonna have to have the staffing to help back it up. But at the same time, if we went through a great recession again, you know, this would be a different conversation. We would be talking about, do we, you know, if the permit activity dropped off the table, we would have to have a more unpleasant conversation.
Right.
But the worst thing that I think you can do as any department head is to start bringing people on and then, you know, laying them off and then rehiring. And once you get into that hire, rehire stuff, it's not a good, pleasant place for us to be. So I think keeping staffing levels right now at the level they're at makes some sense, because we do know that we are poised for growth for the next probably 20, 25 years in terms of commercial employment and residential. So I can't see that the permit activities are going to drop off the table. Even during the Great Recession, we were still issuing permits, right?
Right, yeah.
We were still, you know, building out Via Bois at that point, so. But yes, you should always be looking at the cost side before you come and ask for an increase in fees. You should be looking to see what you can do on the cost side to keep those costs down too.
So it seems to me that the only practical alternative that we might talk about would be, do we do a big increase and then try to do smaller annual adjustments as needed? Or do we take that big increase and say, well, let's step into that over 3 years instead of doing it all at once? And what would be the outcome of that alternative choice of how to approach it?
So we ran a number of different scenarios like that. Do we do 10% this year, 10% next year? 10%?
You can phase if that's the, but the reality is the fees haven't been increased for 14 years, right? So
exactly.
You might want to front load a good portion of it. That would be a recommendation I would think you'd want to consider.
Yeah.
Councilor Linville.
And it's my sense that the reason that those were not incrementally increased along the time while they could have been in smaller increments all the way along was that the permits, the numbers were so high that you didn't need to. It covered all the costs.
We were covering costs on volume.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
Right. So, I mean, the question then comes up, well, why didn't you do that instead of now coming with a big increase right at the end?
Well,
And, but that appears to be the reason.
Yes.
Councilor Ackervall.
But am I correct in understanding, I think it was somewhere in the packet in your presentation as well, that you would be looking at tying it to, what was it, the CIP, like increase?
Some kind
so
of
that
an index.
Yeah, an index so that we wouldn't have these big jumps in the
Correct.
future.
Yes.
That is pretty common.
Yeah.
Typically, we would tie it to an index. Used to be the Portland CPIU, and now I think it's the Seattle CPIU, and is what a lot of jurisdictions.
And that's
That's right.
basically just getting that, it's not like a construction cost, it's employee, it's labor related.
It's more labor
Okay.
costs, yeah.
Okay, which kind of makes sense to, our discussion tonight,
exactly.
what the fund is used, yeah.
So, and a lot of times that is done through the course of an adoption, council adoption of the budget, through the budgetary cycle at the end of the fiscal year. So you just adopt, the next CPIU and you're off to the races.
Or you could put it in the resolution, increasing the fees,
Correct.
so that you didn't have to revisit it. That's what we've done with SDCs as well. You could just say that every year after this, that the fees would be increased by CPIU,
Yeah.
Seattle, or whatever inflationary factor you want to tie it to.
And the council has taken a position that having those built in keeps us from having to remember to do it and getting around to doing it and getting behind the 8 ball, and then a larger increase becomes more difficult.
Yes.
So to sort of wrap up here, this is the timeline I've put together. We do have state law we have to follow for any kind of a building permit fee increase. And so I need to give the state notice. They actually, with that notice, will do their own statewide outreach. So we may hear from Home Builders Association groups. We may hear from their interested parties groups. So if I do that, we're looking at doing our own stakeholder outreach in February, and BCD doing theirs in February, then March or April, we would be looking for a council adoption. And we have to have a public hearing and notice that public hearing, and then proposed fees would be effective July 1st.
Start of the fiscal year.
Start of the fiscal year, yeah.
So if I understood your initial introductory work, your question is council on board with being on the right track?
Yes.
Yes.
Is that the question?
Are we heading in the right direction with the timeline and the proposal?
All right. Councilor Linville.
Well, I just have one more question, and maybe you said this and I missed it, and I apologize if that's the case. But I'm wondering about the 30%. While it sounds reasonable in terms of the averages for our like communities, did you say that would cover the anticipated shortfall? How much over the anticipated budget shortfall would that generate?
It gives us essentially 3 years to assess it as we go, but we believe that with that number, that it gets us there at the end of the 3 years. So,
Okay.
so yes, it does cover the shortfall.
Okay.
After 3 years.
But it
Yes.
takes 3 years to get there.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not like the 30% is going to give this great big carry forward that you're going to then have, it's going to take some time to
Yeah.
get, okay.
So under the methodology that is being proposed, would you have a CPI adjustment the second year and the third year?
That is in that chart, yes,
Okay.
in the second year and the third year. So yeah, that's moving forward. That's what we would propose.
Council, what's your preference?
I think it's good.
I think I'll be interested in hearing what the outreach is, the information is.
Yeah.
I can give you the cliff notes right now.
Yeah, I know.
Nobody wants their fees increased.
No, I know. I guess the only other thing is, I would like to see if we use the CPI or what, the Seattle CPI or whatever, CPIU or whatever it is, when do we then pass that average and get ourselves up on the top of the list?
It depends on what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
Well, and to be fair, it depends on what the development arena is doing. Are we going to get another Villebois type of a rush?
Right.
Where we do have, as Brian mentioned, we have this massive volume that sort of helps sustain things. Or are we going to go through a recession where that revenue stream really drops off?
Yeah.
So a couple of factors that are to be acutely aware of as we go forward every year and revisit
And the
this.
permit volume has allowed us to establish a pretty sizable reserve
Yeah.
to weather a few bad years, but you can't continue to rely upon that without
Yeah.
looking at your fee structure at some
not
point. It's been
healthy.
14 years.
Yeah.
Seems to me to be pretty defensible if we get people that don't like their fees being increased to say, yeah, well, we're going to bring it up so we're average.
And P.S., we haven't increased them for 14 years, so you're welcome.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
that's a pretty good story to tell as well.
Right.
Right.
Okay, I'm sensing the council is
Thank you for your
understanding
time.
and feels like this is appropriate, so thank you much.
And now the fun part.
Now the hard one, the hard
last-
item on the agenda.
The last
Hardest.
chance to
Thank you.
name your monument.
Thank you.
Name your...
This is like picking out carpet.
Carpet
supposed to be
might
fun,
be
I thought,
easier.
no?
Sorry.
I just hope we're not leasing out our monument sign here according to this picture so that,
What does it say? Oh, now leasing?
Yeah, right.
Right.
Where was that
Good evening,
one?
Mayor Knapp, City Councilors, Chris Namsu, Community Development Director for the city. And I'm following up on our November work session where we reviewed 8 different monument sign designs. And as we came out of that meeting in November, I heard several very clear things. Make the logo pop, use the native colors that we designed the logo to be in, which is the blue and green combination, and do a couple other things to try to balance the welcome to as it relates to the spacing and being centered over the Wilsonville and the logo. So I have had 4 additional monument designs prepared, starting with option number 9, which highlights the logo on the column. And again, if you recall in November, we were also split on column versus on the sign. So I'm concerned that I only have 4 counselors tonight because with 5, I at least get 3 too. So
Should be happy.
I know. Well, I just looked at who was on which, and it was 2-2. So the highlighted logo on the column under option 9 is a increased 125% of the other logo that we looked at in options 1 through 8. And it does include a stainless steel backdrop to provide contrast. So Councilor Ackerval, I was mistaken. The brown logo, the brown was including a stainless steel backdrop to the logo to provide contrast to the relatively lighter brown Corten color. So that's where they added the silver backdrop to try to provide the contrast. And you see that contrast on the brick column in option 9. And then we had option 10 without the stainless and back on the logo. But Welcome To is now centered over the entire length of the logo and the word Wilsonville. And then I had it done in option 11 with the stainless steel background, with the welcome to centered again across the entire length of the sign and the logo. And then the mayor mentioned initially at the last meeting that we never looked at that gray color with the logo in its true colors of blue and green. So just to even further complicate things, I included option 12. So.
Councilor Linville.
Would you clarify the difference on option 2 and option 10? My eyes are having a hard time seeing that.
So 2 is a much smaller logo. So the logo has now been increased to 25% essentially. It's gone as large as it can possibly go in the new alternatives. And you'll notice that the welcome to is spaced evenly on the word Wilsonville and not including of the distance that the logo adds to that entire string of text. So those are the 2 primary changes. The logo is pumped up in those new options, another 25%. And it can include a stainless steel backdrop or not, and it can be spaced over the entire line of text and logo or not.
So if you go, can you go to option 10? I can see that it's the logo is.
So it's a 120,
It's bigger.
So it's just the logo that's bigger.
And the
Well,
welcome
and
to
the welcome to is not centered on the word Wilsonville, it's centered on the entire continuum of the word and the logo.
Oh, I see, okay.
So we weren't very good at doing this last time in terms of, so I don't know how to do this very well. So I'll offer this. The blue part of the logo, to me, is almost disappearing on the background without a backer. Anybody else on the logo?
Yeah, agree.
I would agree.
All right, so if we agree that it doesn't show very good, then the option is to do it with a stainless steel backer, either on the center board after the word or on the post to the right. So you've got these 2 options, though the lower one could have the stainless backer to the logo, which would make it.
And that's option 11. That's 11.
There we go. There we go.
So 9 and 11.
Okay.
So with backing and without backing, the signs are the same other than that.
So if we're on this, so to me now on the lower one, the light part of the logo just disappears.
Completely.
You don't see it. So it doesn't work to me without a backer. So then the question is, do you like the logo with the word, or do you like the logo on the post beside it?
I like, my opinion, I like 11. I would center welcome to over Wilsonville.
Yeah, why can't we do that?
And not have it drift off. Because it
I was trying to deal with the variables one at a time, but here you are on the next variable.
That was exactly what was in my head. So why can't you move welcome to down? And that solves everything.
But it looks like the welcome to has drifted off.
All right. Everybody else on the welcome to center.
I agree that the welcome to the arch looks odd to me when it's off center for the word Wilsonville.
Okay, all right. Joanne, do you understand?
Yes, I do, but it looks fine to me.
It looks what?
It looks fine to me. I mean, it looks like it is, the welcome to is in the see, I'm looking at it from the top bar, that very top concrete bar that's up there.
Yeah.
And it is in the center of the sign.
All right. Chris, can you put up one where the logo is on the post instead of on the center? Like that. So then you've got welcome to centered over Wilsonville, and the logo's off to the side, so it's it's not part of the piece where welcome to has to be centered. Better or worse?
Well, to me, it makes the sign look very plain.
This does?
Yeah. The script is plain, and it just seems very plain.
So go back to with the logo, with the word like that, and we don't have one that's like that with the welcome to centered on the word?
Only with the smaller logo.
Yeah.
Well, show them what that looks like, Chris.
Maybe we circle all the way back to option 1.
There you go. That's what it would look like.
So that was the stainless steel option.
Yeah, with no color on it at all. So, yeah.
But this one could have the stainless
See,
backing.
that looks to me like the welcome to
Like it's
is
off
too
to the
far
side,
to the
yeah.
left. It doesn't look like it's centered.
It is indeed, though, centered, isn't it?
Over the word Wilsonville.
Over,
in
not,
option
but it's
two.
Not on
not,
the
not in
sign.
the center of the
Yeah,
sign.
Yeah.
And I'm a Libra.
Okay, so we've got a little divergence on centering the welcome to. We've got agreement that the logo with color needs a stainless backer in order to show. And then we've got the background colors. Are we dealing with that or not?
I thought we had moved past that.
To what? Now you're still showing,
Well, we looked at the 8, we kind of settled on the black. I just brought back the concrete because you asked, Mayor.
oh, okay. You know,
The
I thought we
concrete
were-
is looking better this time. Maybe.
so this is quite dark. Then you had the medium brown one,
Yes.
like that. And then you have the really light one.
I don't have the original with me tonight,
Yeah,
but I
but
have the
this-
very last one.
Yeah,
yes.
that one, right, with it.
Well, the white letters pop more on the dark background, I think, than dark on the light.
And how about the medium? The medium brown.
I don't
like-
particularly
No.
care.
I like the dark one.
Yeah.
And for one thing, where it's located, because I was looking at the roofs on, at Fred Meyer's.
Oh, yeah.
They are all
They're
that color.
That dark
Yeah.
black, almost.
You can see the peak of it there,
Yeah.
Councilor Lehan.
Yeah.
And it does look nice. We were talking about choices of roof color for us, and we're looking at that. The Fred Meyer roofs, I think, look really nice.
Council's in agreement on the dark? Okay.
There we go.
I lost track. Does council prefer the logo to be with the name Wilsonville?
The logo?
I didn't hear anybody say they liked it on the column yet.
Well, I'll say that,
Okay,
just for the sake,
just to argue.
because it's true.
The mayor's been consistent on
Yeah.
his preference for the column.
I'm changing mine. from
Okay,
the
now
color.
I'm
Now what
getting
are we
somewhere.
I like it better on the sign.
You like it better on the sign? Okay,
Yes.
which would be like the top one here.
So bigger
Right.
logo or smaller logo?
Bigger.
Bigger.
Bigger with a background, just like number 11 there, right? On the sign with the stainless backer.
So the only thing less is welcome to.
Welcome to, centered on the word or centered on the entire column-to-column space?
And I've given my opinion, but I will go with whatever the group decides.
Oh,
No,
So
no, I'll
you
give you my rationale on it.
Okay,
To me, it visually looks off-center when it's in the center technically, but because I'm a verbal person, I think the paragraph here is "Welcome to Wilsonville." That's the paragraph, and especially since we made that logo larger, that's a separate element. So Welcome to Wilsonville is its own graphic element, and it is the verbal piece. And here is the logo. That's more like how it would be if it was on the column.
two
It's-
columns.
Yeah,
Yeah.
except it's here, and then here's
Yeah.
Welcome to Wilsonville, and a big logo right
yeah,
next to it.
which was pretty much the reasoning why I liked it on the column.
Yeah, except I think I like it closer to Welcome to Wilsonville than clear over on the column.
Okay, so you prefer the welcome to be centered over the word Wilsonville?
So bring that up, Chris, with the small logo.
But it's different because the one
It
was
is,
different.
it'll just move down to
Yeah.
the left a little.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
no.
Like if we just kind of like
Yeah,
go like that.
So
Yeah.
that's your preference, Counselor? Leahy?
yeah, it would be to center it
Bigger.
as thinking of it as
Oh, yeah.
two graphic
Okay,
elements.
okay. Counselor Akeball, your preference?
I actually totally agree with everything that you just said is how I would view it as well.
Okay,
Can I just make my little comment?
yeah.
Besides the issue of balance across the top, I see it just a little bit different than you do, in that when you look at like athletic logos, where it has the college name and whatever the logo is, that's all one piece. the name and the logo is one piece. And so that's why I was looking at it that way, is that the logo, I don't see it as a separate thing. I see it as all part.
Well, I thought you were done.
I know, I just had an idea.
Counselor Ackerman.
Do we have to have welcome to? Why are we saying welcome to? I mean, we
Because
do
you come off the
obviously want to
off-ramp and
welcome
there it
people.
is. You know.
But, I mean, Wilsonville, you know, like, why are we saying welcome to? Maybe we don't need to say, it's not like our letterhead says welcome to. It, you know,
It's
it's,
just kind of homey, welcoming.
okay. I don't know. It was an idea.
Just throwing that out
But-
Scratch
All
that
right,
part.
But I will still
Before we
go
get
with
too-
whatever you decide.
Before we get too far off topic here, I'm afraid
Welcome to
that,
Wilsonville.
that I
You're
tend
here.
to agree with Councilors Akkerval and Lehan and their thoughts about that. And I'm sorry, Councilor Linville, it doesn't look to my eye that way. So I think that, you know, the majority of the council then would say, center it over the word. Use the color with the 125% size logo on a stainless backer, dark background.
Yes.
Anything else?
No.
Councilor Linville did say, however, that she would be willing to go along with the
She did say that.
I did.
Very
I'll just
gracious,
look
thank
at it like this when I
Just kind of squint one eye.
All right, well, you can look at it like that.
I'll look
ask
at it like that when I
I'll just
come.
have to look at it to the side so that I can pretend the logo's on the column.
Oh, that we only had these kinds of
Yeah,
decisions to make.
this is really momentous, so. All right, sir.
Thank you very
I think
much.
we can do that. Thank you
I'm
very
on it.
much.
I'm on it. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Appreciate your time.
Mr. Cosgrove, anything else?
Nope, we have 15 minutes for our 5-minute council meeting.
Yeah, okay. We should be ready.
All right.
All right, let's call adjournment at 6:40 then, and we'll convene downstairs at 7. Thank you much.